Don't get me wrong, it's super hard and there's lots of barriers in the way, but if you push through, you'll get somewhere.
Well, welcome. First ever episode of Execs Who Run, the podcast where I chat with senior leaders about life, leadership and the miles in between. I'm Jason Hunt, and today we're kicking things off with an awesome guest, Ben Kepes. Ben is the Managing Director of Cactus Outdoor, a outdoor and workwear brand out of New Zealand. He is a tech industry analyst, he is a volunteer firefighter, a paramedic, he's a professional director, and of course he's an ultramarathon runner. We'll be having a conversation about everything from his very unconventional career path to his ultramarathons and a strange routine involving Jack Lovelock. Now, a quick heads up, this is the first episode. The audio is not quite where I want it to be yet, but stick with me. The conversation is well worth it, and I promise it'll only get better from here. All right, let's crack on in. Ben, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, no, not a problem at all. So you've obviously done a lot in your life and your career and lots of challenges, but are you feeling any pressure today being the first guest on the podcast?
So I quite like talking, so pretty much you wind me up and set me go. So in terms of that stuff, that's fine. I'm not big on talking about myself that much, but my sons would say that actually I'm fine with that as well. So no, I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Okay, well, to warm up into it, and we don't have to talk about you too much at the start, we're just going to do a quickfire round, a this or that type conversation. So I've got 10 questions. We're just going to rattle through them, and it should be a nice way to ease into the conversation. So don't think about it too much. Just go with your gut response. So question number 1, morning run or evening run?
Morning, for sure.
All right, solo miles or a group session?
Generally solo.
Road or trail?
I'd like to say trail, but most of it on the road, to be honest.
Music or no music?
Never any music.
Never any music. A true traditionalist there. Training plan or just go with the flow?
Just bulk, done miles.
Yeah, nice. Well, this one might be an obvious one then. Easy long runs or quick intense workouts?
Super easy, super long.
Yeah, nice. Big city marathons or local park runs?
Neither really. Off-road trail ultras.
Yeah, nice. Chasing times or just enjoying the miles?
Chasing such Strava segments and at the very least local legend.
Yep, nice. I could definitely relate to that one. Competing with others or competing against yourself?
I mean, everyone would say, if I was being zen, I'd say competing against myself, but the reality is we're athletes, we're competitive by nature, so a little bit of both.
And we might have had a giveaway with that, given the Strava segment comment from the previous question. All right, last one. The finish line feels, that what you get when you cross the line, or more about just enjoying the journey of training and the race itself?
Yeah, I'd like to say it's about the journey, but it's always about the destination.
Nice. Okay, awesome. So the first kind of interesting story that I want to dive into, tell me about your little ritual. So I'll go into it first. So the Old Ghost Ultra, you've done, I think, 7 times now. But there is an old wee ritual that you have every year when you go down to do that. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you're a Timaru boys, old boy. So probably the most famous, certainly the most famous runner from Timaru boys was Jack Lovelock, famous at the Olympics and had a sad demise at the end of his life. But Jack Lovelock grew up in a tiny little village, which isn't there anymore, a gold mining town on the way to Repton, which is on the way to the west coast of the South Island. And I never knew that, but I was driving to the Old Ghost one year, saw this little statue stop, and it was the Jack Lovelock Memorial. And so doing the number of miles that I do, I always have lots of worn out shoes. So my annual ritual before going to the Old Ghost is to take an old pair of shoes and to just casually hang them over the Jack Lovelock Memorial as a bit of a token of respect, I guess, for what he did.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. As a Timaru Boy's old boy, we've got a statue of him outside, and there's a bunch of his medals in our memorial library and whatnot. So he's a big part of Timaru. I think he's probably the most famous old boy, not just runner old boy from the school. So certainly get that. Maybe do you have any other like significant running inspirations or heroes or people that you look up to? Like Jack might be one now, but are there other people out there that you really look up to?
I mean, I try not to do that sort of thing because human beings are always flawed, and so anytime you put someone up on a podium, they all of a sudden you realise they're flawed. But if I had to be pressed, so Ruth Croft, who is one of the top 2 or 3 ultramarathon runners in the world, has done amazingly well, races like UTMB and other in Western states, and grew up on the West Coast as well. And the reason why I say her is because she's just a really, really great person. And so, a little story about Ruth. A couple of years ago, her partner Martin Cathari is a French runner and very involved in the running community. And they were over, and she spends the off season here in New Zealand. They spend it together. He came and he ran the Old Ghost, and she was just there supporting. He finished. She took him home, tucked him into bed. She came back and was at the finish line supporting everyone who finished, and then helping pack the finish line down at 11:30 at night. This is a professional athlete. You think about other sports where maybe they might sign a few autographs and go off to their hotel, but to me that's the true character of the person. So I absolutely look up to Ruth, but more as a human being than as an athlete, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's very cool. I think people, and we might touch on this a bit later, but I think the ultra running scene in particular has a lot of that going on, right? Everyone is very wanting to give back to the community, and that's the kind of epitome of that. It's cool. Right, we're gonna go into the section that you don't want to do too much, but we're going to talk about you for a little bit. And in particular, I want to touch on your career journey, because it's probably an unconventional one to say the least. Dropped out of high school, not even university. We have lots of tech founders who dropped out of Stanford to start, billion-dollar companies, but you didn't even make it through high school. You've done a myriad of things throughout your career. You've obviously built a successful business and on lots of boards. But take me back to that day that you dropped out of high school. What were you thinking? What were your parents thinking? And take me through the story from there.
Yeah, so my dad was a doctor, and like many children of doctors, I was always expected to follow in his footsteps and do medicine. But frankly, I was just kind of lazy, and so I always did okay at school because I'm relatively smart, I guess. But I never put any real effort in, and then dropped out. And I distinctly remember the school I went to was not a it was a pretty good school, and it was sort of suburban New Zealand, and so it was very white, it was very clean, and the expectation was very much university or whatever. And I remember, talking to one teacher and her being shocked that I was throwing my life away. But I just wasn't, I wasn't achieving anything at school, and so I left school and I went and did an electrical apprenticeship and became an electrician. Which turned out to, I don't regret doing that. The only problem with it was that I didn't really like being an electrician, which was a bit of a strategic blunder. But I think there's no strategy there. There wasn't any kind of here's a plan, here's what we do. But I think the only takeaway I can say is that if you're not enjoying what you're doing, and that doesn't mean that, sometimes stuff's really hard. I mean, running ultramarathons is really hard, but if there's not something enjoyable in what you're doing, whether it's ultramarathon or work, you shouldn't be doing it. Do something else. And so I've always been a follower of just kind of stuff that interests me. Probably in the extreme, probably I don't have, I am a bit of a magpie in terms of the shiny new thing or whatever. And so, there's that balance between doing all the things and focusing really deeply on the one thing. And I definitely lean, maybe arguably too far to the former, but that's served me well throughout my life. I've just done a heap of things just because they've been interesting to me, I guess.
Yeah, okay. And so electrician, decided you didn't want to do that. Tell me when Cactus started to come into the picture.
Yeah, so I grew up in Wellington. Wellington, there was a bunch of kind of outdoor people, people that like tramping, climbing, biking, that sort of stuff. So I was kind of a little bit involved in that scene. I did my apprenticeship and I got off overseas for a couple of years and kind of travelled around the world. And when I came back, I bumped into sort of an old acquaintance who had started this little cottage industry in his bedroom making book bags, rock climbing book bags. And he kind of waxed poetic about, us doing this thing. And so him, myself and another guy, Rob, kind of did this cactus thing. And that was Cactus started officially in 1992. I got involved in 95. I kind of call the three of us co-founders because it wasn't really a business so much before then. So it was kind of 95, 96 that we started getting serious. And, fast forward to today, we're 33 years old or something. We have, pretty well established brand. We've got retail stores around the place, we do e-commerce all around the world. And I think the thing that's kind of cool and again atypical is that the three of us still own it. I'm the majority shareholder, but the other two are still involved, in a shareholding capacity. And it's a family business, and so my two sons work in the business, and we're very much playing that kind of intergenerational game as opposed to the sort of pump and dump, get investment and then flick it on kind of a model.
Yeah, cool. I want to come back to your sons a little bit later in the conversation, so we'll pick up on that. So Cactus, you've got this awesome wee business. You make some pretty cool products. Actually, what is the favorite product that you think you make at Cactus?
Yeah, so our iconic product is probably our Canvas jacket, and so it's a down jacket that's essentially wrapped in industrial canvas, and so. What's kind of cool is that there's a bunch of people who work down in Antarctica who all get given uniforms from different companies or whatever, and invariably those guys and girls, when they're in Christchurch passing through, will come into our store and buy one of these jackets that they'll then use down on the ice, despite the fact that they get given other gear. And so, generally speaking, the stuff we make is absolutely bomb-proof and deeply respected by professional and hardcore users, and that product is probably the epitome of that.
Yeah, right. And I imagine perfect for Central Otago or plains in Canterbury during winter for the farmers, because pretty cold and pretty rugged terrain out there. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And we've got a bunch, Alaska and Canada and different places like that.
Yeah, your jacket's good if it can be handled in Alaska or Canada and Antarctica, right? All right, on the other side of your kind of career, and there's a few things probably to unpack, but when did you start deciding that the director pathway was something that you wanted to do? And tell me a little bit about how you got into that and how that's kind of grown from when you started.
Yeah, so it kind of happened another way around. So I ran Cactus for about 10 years, and I'm back running it again now. But about sort of 2005, 2006, I started getting interested in technology. It was when Amazon Web Services and Salesforce.com and Xero and other companies were starting off. And so I started kind of talking about that stuff and going to conferences and whatever. And that then embarked on sort of 15 years of being a technology industry analyst in the US. But as part of that, I got involved in a bunch of startups as an investor initially or as an advisor, and then started doing a bit of governance. So I have been on board of a bunch of different tech startups, some that have failed, some that I've been involved in 3 or 4 companies that we've sold to US listed or other UK listed organisations, and that got me interested in governance. And I think that this kind of goes back to my character, the whole thing that trying a new thing. I think that when in the past, when I've just been doing one single job, I've always got slightly down, because in business, right, things go up, things go down. And when things are down and you've only got one job, it's kind of a bit depressing. But what really appeals to me about governance, especially, I'm on 8 or 10 different boards, is that there's always one that's going really, really well. And it's really interesting and really challenging. And, that really balances the ones that aren't going so well. And so I guess just before COVID, I started thinking that, the tech work was amazing. Like, I was earning incredible money. I would, I would be, because I'm still living in New Zealand, people would fly me business class to Europe or to America to talk for half an hour, put me up at a beautiful, location and then fly me back. And it was amazing and exciting. It was very, good for bank balance. But I didn't really feel like I was making a difference. And so I sort of had a bit of a crisis in terms of, not really a crisis, but, I had challenges in terms of, the importance of what I was doing and wanting to leave a legacy. And so I decided that I'd focus more on governance. And so the great thing about governance that I get to interact with these organisations on a once a month, once every 6 weeks basis, and it's not in the weeds, but you get to sort of shape the strategy and the direction of these organisations. So I'm on the board of technology, infrastructure, insurance, health, a bunch of different organisations, and I really love it. I mean, I get to sit around board tables with some really, really smart people and have some really, really interesting and challenging conversations. And so it's kind of my happy place. And I think because about a year ago, I took over again running Cactus. And so balancing the whole, Cactus is very much in the weeds, kind of firefighting everyday problems, kind of, in the operationally running the business. And so balancing that with the governance stuff, which is the opposite of that, really suits my kind of makeup or psyche, I guess.
Yeah, nice. That magpie is still able to chase the shiny things, and there's lots of different things to get involved with and keep interested in, right? Okay, so tell me about running. How did you get into running? Because you weren't a runner back in school. You picked it up in your 30s. So what prompted that decision?
Yeah, so I absolutely wasn't a runner at school. I wasn't really anything at school. I was a asthmatic kid that never did PE. In my sort of 17, 18, 19, I sort of got into cycling a bit. It was the early days of mountain biking, so did quite a bit of that, did a bit of road racing, very badly, I must say. And rode my bike, around the world, cycle toured and all that sort of stuff. And then when I was back in New Zealand, we live in the country. We live about an hour north of Christchurch. And so the whole riding thing just doesn't, there's only a couple, two roads, and they're both state highways going north and south, and actually one going west as well. And it didn't really, the idea of riding myself on a state highway riding my bike didn't really appeal. And so, about, I guess, 20 odd years ago, I discovered running. I'd never really done any running. And there's a few local races that I did around here. And I remember, I'm sure we'll talk about my boys later, but I remember, when they were little, I would run and they would ride, and I'd have to sort of stop while they caught up on their little bike with training wheels. And then it moved to them riding and me almost keeping up with them. And then they started running. And then, this morning, I ran 26K with both my boys. And so it's been a really great sport to do it with them, and it just expanded. I did a bunch of road, half marathons, which I really got into for a while, and then did a few marathons, and then kind of got the trail bug and did ultras and went sort of longer. And so now I do a little bit of stuff on the road, but mainly sort of trail ultras.
Okay, tell me, what was the first moment, I guess, in your running journey that you're like, this is the thing for me. This is what I want to spend some time doing?
Yeah, so I like I said, I'd cycled for quite a few years, and I was always pretty crappy at it. I quite enjoyed it, but I wasn't very good. And then I started running, and I did a few just little local races, like a little duathlon close by where I live, or the Christchurch half or whatever. And like I'm not good, don't get me wrong. I'm just a punter, but I actually did okay, considering my age, my non-athletic background, and those sorts of things. And so it just kind of grew from there. Like I say, we as athletes, we talk about it being about the journey and not the destination, but we are primed to respond to results. And when you start, doing okay in the odd race, it does start to be kind of validating, and you get into it. I mean, I think Strava is amazing, and I've used Strava. I met those guys when in the very early days when I first started it in Silicon Valley. And it's an awesome thing. I am mindful that it has increased this sort of need for the sort of, the hit of another segment or another part, a certain pace or whatever. And so it's taken away from that sort of essence of running. I think back to, Alpha Lydiard, the great running coach from here in New Zealand. And, his thing was you go out on a Sunday for 4 or 5 hours and take a watch. And there weren't GPSs back then. You just time on feet. And we're now in a world where it is all about, KOMs and segments and local legends and stuff. But it is what it is. So I do like that validation that comes from doing well, and that has reinforced my running trajectory, I guess.
Yeah, I think we all do, right? I think Strava and KOMs and local legends, they help. They probably are some downsides to them as well, but I think that whole kind of gamification of the sport has made it more engaging and more interesting. And we're obviously seeing running absolutely taking off, and that has to have some kind of element to it, right? That social. Social media is so big. We all want that actual social connection, but I think you build into some kind of social media element to it, and it has a similar kind of impact, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You think about things like Run Club, where they're blending, real life, events or community alongside social and Strava thing. That's a much more positive way of doing things than simply, all the virtual stuff. So there are some benefits that these platforms are helping to facilitate, true social connection sometimes.
Totally. I think all connection is good, and if it has to start online and then we get to run groups and running together, it's all a win. All right, so you've decided that the craziness of ultra running is the thing that you want to be doing with your time. I think everybody at different distances that they run, there'll be listeners that the 5K park run is their thing, and they'll look at people doing halves, go, what the hell are they doing? And then the ones that are doing halves are going, what are the marathoners doing? And then myself as a marathoner, I go, there's no chance I'm ever doing an ultra. That is just ridiculous. You obviously got there, so tell me why, firstly, you decided ultra marathon running was the thing for you. And then what's been the most kind of out there crazy experience you've had ultra marathon running?
Yeah, so I think I'm built for, more for ultras than for shorter distances. I've never tried to do a really fast 5K, for example. I've tried to nudge a half marathon time, but I'm never going to set the world on fire there. And so some of it's pragmatism. Some of it is, I'm 53 now. And so the impact of trying to train to do a fast road marathon is really, really high. Whereas the reality is that anyone can go and run a 100K race. I know it sounds ridiculous because whatever, but it's way easier to run a 100K ultra than it is to run a decent fast road marathon, like significantly easier. And so I'm kind of, it sounds funny, but I'm kind of lazy, right? It's way easier to go and do junk bulk miles and be okay to do 80, 100, whatever K race than it is to go and do, I don't do structured training, and I've tried in the past and it just hurts too much. And so that was kind of the rationale. I mean, it's, I joke with people, it's like ultras are really easy. You just go way slower and eat more food than shorter races. And it's a joke, but it's kind of actually the case. Like I've done a bunch of 100-mile races, and when you're running for 20, 30 hours, you can absolutely have 5-6 hours, which just struggle for street and still do fine. In a road marathon, you can't hit a single. If you drop tempo for 100 meters, you're rated pretty much all over in terms of your target. And so I really like the fact of that. And the other thing I think is that especially in these races where you run right through the night, it's really interesting just kind of observing yourself and sort of thinking about where you're at. And I often I have this mental picture in my mind, I'll be running around at 4:00 in the morning on my own with a headlamp. And I don't have an out of body experience or anything, but I try and kind of get out of myself a little bit and just kind of observe where I'm at and think about it. And it's pretty beautiful. Like the first time I ever did a 100-mile race was one near where I live. And in the middle of the night, it started snowing. And it was absolutely beautiful. I was running around with a headlamp and the sparkling crystals of snow were lighting up. It was like a wonderland. It also helped that the dude that was winning the race was wearing a tri-suit and didn't have any other gear. And so he got hypothermia and walked the last 40K and I passed and ended up actually winning the race. So it's my fastest ever 100-mile race. But even outside of the fact that I won, it was actually a pretty cool experience to just be there in the middle of the night running on your own.
That does sound pretty epic, and a win's a win, right? You take it whichever way it comes. You're talking about ultramarathon running being easy. It is a little bit crazy to hear. I can kind of see that personally. I find any distance, like the longer the distance gets, somehow it gets easier, right? Because I think that intensity. I was actually listening to another podcast, and they were doing some comparisons of general fitness trends, but the two running related things in it were essentially which is harder, trying to run a 4-hour marathon or a sub 20-minute 5K. And 100% trying to run a sub 20-minute 5K is a lot harder than trying to run a 4-hour marathon, right? And I think just the longer you get, it does start to get a little bit easier. I also remember my uncle who does crazy ultras being talking about the aid stations and having pies and chips and chocolate chip cookies, and if you need anything, if you can eat that kind of stuff during a running race, it can't be that hard, right?
Totally. Well, that's the thing. Your intensity level has to be, because no one can run at high intensity for 30 hours. It's just impossible. So you have to be at a low enough intensity that you're not stretching your system. Therefore, you can eat all of the things.
Totally. What's your go-to snack when you're doing races like that?
So recently I've tried to be a little bit more disciplined. I was always just slam all the crap. So, jet planes, chips, 100-mile race I did, I really got into beer sticks. I am trying to be a bit more disciplined with nutrition. So, tailwind is my electrolyte of choice, and then gels, which after 10 or 15 hours, it's really hard to face yet another gel. But for shorter stuff, kind of up to 10 hours, try and slam gels. But it is, on the really, really long ones, it is really nice to have actual real food. So, sandwiches or, chips or salty potatoes or whatever.
Yeah, gels, even in a marathon, they get a bit much, and nothing can beat a good jet plane at the end of the day, right? So you do a fair bit of running. You run about 100 Ks a week. I think I checked out your Strava, and that seems to be about what you're doing at the moment, which is a fair bit of running. How do you fit it all in? You're running a business. You're a director on 8 to 10 boards. You've got a family. You do all this stuff. Talk to me. What does your day look like to enable you to be able to get this all fitting in and actually make sense?
Yeah, so I have got a little bit slack in the last couple of years. So when I was traveling a bunch for the tech stuff, like I was doing 300,000-400,000 miles a year, every morning I would run at 5 a.m. So I would fly from New Zealand to US or Europe or whatever. No matter what, I'd get up 5 a.m. the next morning and run. And I'd generally do 20K. And so, but you do that by 6:30, so you're still getting back to your hotel when you have your shower, and about the time people are thinking about getting up. So I was pretty focused and pretty disciplined back then. I'm far less disciplined now, and I'm a little bit busier. I need my sleep, but I get up pretty early every morning. My alarm goes at 5, and generally I get up, and so sometimes I'll run at home at that time, so 5:30 or whatever. The great thing about, I'm busy, but the great thing about doing governance work is that it's kind of all over the place. And so you've got a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of downtime. So I've got a bunch of mates that I run with, in the city, and 3 or 4 times a week we'll run around the park, do 10 or 15K or whatever. And you only need to do that, you do that 5 days a week and you're up to 70K, and you do a long run on the weekends. And so it's pretty easy to get 100K, easy-ish. I mean, it's a real cliche, but if you want something, don't ask a busy person. I think about the times that I don't particularly like, summer holidays, because it's really boring. Like I'm driven by doing stuff. And so I want to be busy. I never want to have downtime. And the worst thing, is like if I'm sitting on the couch doing scrolling Insta, I feel terrible about myself. And so from a, for everyone, like from a mental health perspective, being busy, being active, doing stuff is self-reinforcing. And so, I don't consider myself that busy. I don't have like a 9-to-5 real job. I look at people that do, and I don't know how they fit it in, but I've got the flexibility, so I can run a punch.
When you were having to be very structured around it, and you were disciplined, would be the word I use, and we'll talk to a lot of people about. Outside of the discipline of just being like, okay, it's 5 o'clock, I'm getting up, I'm going to run 20K, and personally, I think that is the thing that people need to get if they want to try and fit this stuff in. They just need to get that routine set. But are there any other little things that you think make a big difference to really making sure that, whether it's making that discipline a bit easier to actually achieve, or any other things that will really just help people on their journey to get running integrated into their life more?
Yeah, it's really funny. And so because I've never done structured training, like I said, and so therefore I don't really do rest days. And so, the common theory is that you should have 2 or 3 rest days a week, and you do your intense sessions, but then you recover from them. Because of the racing that I do, I don't really do that. So I think if I think about the time when I was fittest, it's about, so consistency is the first thing. I'll run 6 or 7 days a week, not with any intensity, but I'll run 6 or 7 days a week. And if I think about the time that I was probably the fittest, so I did Leadville in Colorado, the 100-mile race that was, and Born to Run in that book. And when I was training for that, I did got stupid with doing probably junk miles, but I was doing 200K weeks. And so I would do, there was 1 week I did 5 marathons in 1 week. And I wanted to, train for running in the dark or whatever. So I'd go out at 10 o'clock at night and run a marathon, and still do, like they were definitely for sub 4, they were sort of 3:20, 3:30, which for me, like I'm not fast. So that's a reasonably good clip. And honestly, like when you're doing a 200K week and you've got a base of, like I've run for 20 years, and I probably average, I guess a bit less now, but 5,000-ish Ks a year. Like it's just, you don't get injured. Your body knows, your body's good at it's adapted to burning fat. You can just do those miles, and it feels so good. And just comparing where I am now to back then, which was a few years ago, it's so hard to regain fitness. It's so much easier to maintain. So I've got no tips for anyone, but if I was to have a tip, I'd say just keep at it, because especially if you get older, it's so much harder to get it back.
That continuous activity is so important. I think about Cameron Brown, and if listeners don't know who Cameron Brown is, look him up, but he's essentially one of New Zealand's best ever long distance triathletes, and he only retired from racing professionally a couple years ago at the age of 50, and he was still competitive. Like he was a good athlete, and he just never stopped. That's kind of what kept him going. I'm sure he's still doing a fair bit now. It's pretty hard to get out of that kind of routine. And you've also stoked another generation of crazy runners and probably crazy business people as well in your kids. So I want to hear, you touched on it a little bit before about them jumping on the bikes and that turning into running. they've also kind of followed you into the business world, and building this generational business with Cactus Outdoor, which is very cool. Tell me a little bit about that dynamic and how that's kind of played out over the years.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I've got two sons. The older one, he kind of always wanted to emulate dad. And so I've got photos of him as this little chubby kid wearing my sunglasses and running top, like doing races and stuff. The younger one hates it. He's very independent. So he hates anything that dad did. And so for years and years, the older one and I would race together, run together, train together, do everything together. And the younger one wasn't interested. But my youngest son's partner, his partner he's been with for 7 or 8 years, she's got quite into running. And so next month at the Old Ghost Ultra, which is my favourite race, but both my boys as well as the partner of the younger one are going to do that. So that's going to be pretty amazing. That's an 85k ultra. My youngest son has never done an ultra. The longest he's run is probably 30k. So it's going to be, there's going to be maybe some tears. He can have a hard time. He's going to be pretty silly, but I'm sure he'll get through it. But it is, joking aside, it's pretty cool. Like I say, this morning we went out. So, we did 28k, the three of us. Those two bought a house together and lived together and renovating a house together. We all work together. My long-suffering wife, their mother, gets really sick of hearing business talk because when the three of us together, we kind of obsessed about business. But like I am incredibly lucky as a dad to, my best mates, my boys, I work with them. We run together. We see each other all the time. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Tell me about their... both of your, I know definitely one of your boys is working in the business, but they're both working in the business, correct?
Yeah, they're both working in the business. They both feel super passionate about our business, but they also feel really passionate about business. So they're both pretty entrepreneurial. And so neither of them went to university. One did a gap year in England. One was going to go and travel, but COVID happened. And so kind of Cactus was the logical thing. They will go and do some other stuff and not leave the business, I'm sure, as they should. But for now, they're doing an awesome job. They started on the factory floor. There wasn't kind of this nepotistic, their managers from day one kind of thing. They earned their places and they're doing an awesome job.
Awesome. I want to ask, I think it's a common thing to see often when we bring someone else along on a journey. Coaches see it, or I'm sure parents see it. When someone else is coming through a journey that you've been through in the past and you're sharing your wisdom and whatnot, you start to see things from a slightly different viewpoint as well, because you're seeing what you did but reflected a bit differently and went, oh, is that how I did it? Or, oh, that's interesting. What have you learnt from your sons, whether it be their running journey as they've come into it or coming into business?
Yeah, that was a great question. So I think, the thing I play is that as a parent, all we want is for our children to be, well, obviously happy and healthy, but we want them to be better people than we are. We want to leave our world in a better place, and we do that through our legacy, which is our kids. And I can unashamedly say that my boys are better people than I am. I'm always learning stuff from them. Like, it's interesting. My older son is so much like me, and so it's really interesting looking at an individual and identifying the flaws that they adopted from yourself. And then it's interesting, our younger son tends to be quite analytical and very good at, holding dad to account and has no qualms about pointing out my failings, which is all good. That's fine. So I think I've never been a strong believer in this whole kind of, distinct roles, as a parent or a son. I think, my sons are my buddies, they're my mates, and so I don't consider myself the, authoritarian father figure who should be obeyed, which is a really interesting context because at work I'm nominally the boss, but frankly, the three of us kind of run it together because it's a family business. So, like, I'm not a fantastic parent. My wife's done a far better job of bringing him up than I have. But I think for me, being respectfully friends with your kids and vice versa seems like the most natural approach towards parenthood.
That's very cool. Maybe an extension on this, because you've seen them come up through a running thing and through a business as well. What parallels do you draw between running and business more broadly, particularly given you've always been an entrepreneur and a businessman, but running was a later thing? So maybe that similar question: what have you learned about business from running, or about running from business?
Yeah, totally. So all the cliches. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. The things that are good are generally hard as well. Put the effort in, the rewards will come. All of that stuff. I mean, especially when it comes to ultras. And so, like, I've only ever DNF'd one ultra, and it was a 100-mile race, and I was at kilometre 130, 30k to go. It would have taken me another 3 or 4 hours to finish. I just couldn't be shagged. Sat down in the seat and stayed there. And life, business, running, it is all like that. It's very rare in a running race that you simply cannot physically or mentally, compete with things. Like, I think about on training runs, so many times I'll be out and I'll be like, no, I just can't be bothered, I'll just walk home. But yeah, like that I was saying, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. It's the top 3 inches. And so, and business is the same. I mean, I think that, don't get me wrong, it's super hard and there's lots of barriers in the way, but if you push through, you'll get somewhere, and it's the same in running. And so I think, it's a real cliche that, life is like an ultramarathon, or business is like an ultramarathon, but it kind of is. And it's really interesting that, you'll see it in your line of work. So many, high caliber business people or executives are athletes as well, whether they're into climbing mountains or Ironman or ultramarathons or whatever. There are some real parallels, and there's a reason why, I get high performing, individuals are drawn to both those things.
Yeah, for sure. I think people like challenge, right? And both business and any athletic endeavor, whether it be running or something else, provides that challenge and provides something interesting for them to do. But your life hasn't always just been about challenge. You also do a lot of community work, which is pretty cool. I know you're a qualified paramedic. You have been a volunteer firefighter for a long period of time. But there's one particular story that I'd like to dive into, and it's about the Odyssey House. So for listeners who don't know what the Odyssey House is, it is a community support place for people who are going through drug and alcohol addiction. And maybe I won't jump into it too much, because I might let you tell the story, because you'll be able to tell it better. But I think there's an interesting connection that you explored there. You've done a bit of work there yourself, but with how running can have an impact on individuals who are struggling with those things. Yeah,
and caveat this with it's certainly not my story to tell, and I'm not really involved with that anymore. But the Beat Freaks is a charitable organisation that was set up by actually, and the guy that set it up is the father of Scotty Hawker, who's a well-known professional ultra-marathon runner. And basically, it's pretty simple. It's a bunch of volunteer coaches go running with individuals who are in rehab. There's similar programs, that happen around the world. And so I got involved a few years ago, and for a couple of years kind of helped out there until I got a bit busy or whatever. But when I did that, I found it quite inspiring that, so lots of different things. You're seeing people who have had, real trauma in their life, and so it's a really good way to feel some gratitude for how lucky one is to not be in that position. You see people who, like the people in that program who, when they started, couldn't run or could run 500 meters or whatever. And there's one guy in particular who I ran with a bunch back when I was doing that, and him and I ran his first 100K race together. And it's a guy who was, he was fighting his demons or whatever. He had I don't know about his past, but I'm sure he had a pretty difficult past. But he found redemption, I guess, through running. And so, a similar thing, I've done a bit of guiding with the Achilles Foundation. So Achilles Foundation, helps disabled, people that suffer from some sort of disability run races. And often you see Achilles runners guiding blind runners. And there's a guy who's got some intellectual disabilities, I guess. And I've done a couple of races with him. I did the Queenstown Marathon, I guess, a couple of months ago. And it's just awesome. It's just awesome helping someone who maybe wouldn't have been able to get there without your help. I mean, it's, I think it's really, in this world, so you talk about the volunteering stuff I do. Back a generation ago, every community was built by people that volunteered, whether it was, the local St. John or scouting or whatever. And I think what's really sad about modern society is because we're all busy and we all have big mortgages to pay and all that sort of stuff. But because people don't volunteer so much, they don't realise how incredibly rewarding it actually is to volunteer. And so the volunteering stuff that I do, I put in quite a lot of effort, but I get out way more than I put in because it feels good to help people. So whether it's guiding for speed freaks or for Achilles or my firefighting or whatever, it feels good to do stuff to help people, I guess.
Yeah, it's very true. But you're right. It does make a massive difference, and makes a massive difference to the people who are having that support. When we think about the running side of things, and you've clearly seen the impact that it's had on, supporting through the Achilles Foundation or through Odyssey House. Do you think there's any learnings that you'd take from that you'd try and give to just regular people who are probably listening to this podcast around the impact that running can have on their life?
Yeah, so it's tricky. Everyone's an amateur philosopher, but just, I guess, being present and having perspective. And so, it's like they're saying it's never as good nor as bad as you think it is. Or, like I said before, if you don't can or you think you can't, you're right. We are so lucky to live in the society we live in, at the time we live in, with, an economic system that, though difficult, is still so much better than if we were living 200 years ago. Our quality of life, our life expectancy, infant mortality, at every metric, we are fortunate. I often say when, I remember, during COVID, I'd be doing virtual board meetings and we'd go check in at the start, how are you doing? Oh, so stressed, there's so much on, it's so difficult. And it's like, honestly, you've done a couple of board meetings today. How hard is that? You could have been born in sub-Saharan Africa and be down the diamond mines or something, or salt mines somewhere up in Russia or somewhere. It's like, honestly, we're so lucky. And so, and it's something I'm not very good at being mindful and being present and being appreciative and appreciating those around me. It's definitely a work on for me. But I think doing that stuff, seeing what people are going through, in drug rehab, or seeing people who are born blind or with some other disability, makes you appreciate how lucky you are to not be in that situation.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think we do underestimate how much we've got going for us, in this part of the world, whether it be New Zealand, Australia, or other countries where we've got it pretty easy. And seeing some of that's always a nice, fresh perspective, I think, to ground you a little bit sometimes. Obviously, doing ultramarathon running, resilience is something you just need. It has to be baked in, right? Because as you've kind of mentioned, physically, you're maybe not having to work too hard, although you still have to run for several hours. But mentally, that must just be the most draining experience sometimes, particularly when it does start to get a little bit harder physically. How have you seen your broader resilience increase or change, or what impact has that had in the rest of your life? And do you think that people getting into running at any level will see an impact in how they handle setbacks through running?
Yeah, so for myself, I'm still trying to work out whether, in fact, I'm resilient or that I've just got real issues. Or I'm detuning from my emotions.
You've got to screw loose.
Really, I'm feeling. Well, there's every chance that I'm just an arsehole, really, and I'm willing to accept that. I think for other people, I think that if you take a baseline of today and not running, and then building up to whatever distance is a challenge for you, or doing something you don't know whether you're able to succeed, going through that journey and succeeding or not succeeding can't help but build resilience. Like if you succeed, if you want to run a marathon in under 4 hours, and you get to that point, forever and a day, you will have achieved that. You will have built the skills, the capability, the self-awareness, the self-confidence to do that. If you don't do that, that's also fine, because you will have tried, you will have strived, and you will have learned to deal with failure. And I think that I quite like quotes, but Teddy Roosevelt, former US president, had a quote, which is basically, I'll paraphrase, it's really easy for the man, as he said, the person who's never been inside the arena to criticize someone who's in the arena and has failed. But it's the person that takes the risk, that puts themselves on the line, that tries. Maybe they fail, maybe they succeed, but that person is the hero. The critic is never the hero. And I think that, especially in this day and age with social media and keyboard warriors and whatever, and I'm guilty of it myself, but everyone's an expert, everyone has a voice, everyone can opine, everyone can pass judgment. Walk a mile and the other man should, I guess.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point, and we might dive into that a little bit in a sec. But I have a question for you. So you're a prolific writer, right? You write a lot of, actually, we talk about people opining. You write plenty of opinion pieces for various outlets around the world, sometimes just general things that are going on, sometimes more specific in the tech space. Why haven't we seen a Ben Kepes podcast? You love talking. Surely that's the next step in your journey.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when I started the whole tech stuff, blogging was the thing, and so this is 2006, 7, I guess. And so I was a prolific blogger, and then sort of later on, webinars became kind of quite common. I did quite a few of those. If I was starting that journey today, I'm sure I would be a podcaster. And every time, because I've been on quite a few different podcasts, and every time I do it, I'm like, man, it's so fun. Like just talking to different people is really, really interesting. I think at this point in my life, I don't think I would do one myself. I'd be really keen to do one with someone else, collaborative effort about, whatever. But yeah, never say never. I think it would probably be, like, I'm in no way qualified to do anything about running, but if I was going to do something, I think it would be around sort of governance and sort of modern approaches towards business and all the intersection of that and technology. I think that would kind of be the area.
Yeah, I think that would be very interesting. You obviously still write a lot about that kind of stuff, which is useful. But if you're not going to start your own thing, we'll have you back on here at any time, and you can come and talk about running if you just want to talk about running, or we could dive down a governance chat as well. I'm sure our listeners might be quite interested in that. All right, so as our first guest, it's been amazing having you today, and you've talked about a lot of really interesting things, and you've given lots of tidbits of advice. I want to focus on two. I want your number one key piece of advice for, actually no, let's make it three. Your number one key piece of advice for leadership, your number one key piece of advice for life, and your number one key piece of advice for running.
So leadership, it's definitely give the credit and take the blame. I've been lucky enough to have spent time with some amazing leaders. I've spent time with Richard Branson other incredible individuals, and the people who shine are the people who, give the credit and take the blame and are relentlessly positive. Absolutely a work on for me, but that's one thing. In life, I think, again, all of these pieces of advice are things that I need to take myself. So they're things that I'm a bit more at. So I'm no expert, but perspective and not sweating the small stuff. That's definitely a work on for me. And I get way too angst-ridden about stuff that really, really doesn't matter. But honestly, in 100 years, none of it will matter. So don't sweat the small stuff. And then running, it's just don't stop. I think about that DNF. And I can never take that back. I will always have DNF, 100-mile race. The only thing that I needed to do was just carry on, put one foot in front of the other. And it still happens all the time. Often when I'm out training, I'll be, I want to do 20, 25K. And I just can't be asked. I did 10 or whatever. And so, I don't beat myself up on for that. And it's fine if people don't achieve, but the way to do well in running is to just keep going. Put one foot in front of the other. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. Just relentless forward progress.
That's a great piece of advice, and I think it comes down to the simplicity of running. Like, running is great because it's so straightforward. You don't have to be Elliot Kipchoge and running a 2-hour marathon. You can just go running. You lace up, get out the door and go running. And then it's really just, once you're out the door, which is sometimes the hardest part, it's just one foot in front of the other. And that's all you have to kind of crack on and do, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And it's the reason I love running compared to cycling when I used to do that is that it's probably the purest sport. You only need a pair of running shoes and shorts and t-shirt or whatever. It's I'm really lucky. I run in, actually I could count sometime, but I've probably run in 40 or 50 countries. Like I've run in Iceland at 3 o'clock in the morning in the full sun. I've run in the desert. I run all around the world, and to be able to just like you say, lace up and head out the door and do it, it's just cool.
It sure is. So, being the first guest, you get a slightly easier finish to the podcast, because something that I'm going to do is I'm going to get each guest to leave a question for the next guest. Obviously, I don't have a question left for you, so you get to be spared that. I've probably thrown enough at you today. But what question would you like to put forward to the next guest that comes onto the podcast?
So my question is kind of similar to ones you've asked me, which is that, because the focus on this podcast is obviously, high-powered leaders and, runners of some level, and I'm assuming you're going to get, generally they're going to be people that run reasonably consistently. How does running make you a better person, a better leader? And how does being a leader make you a better runner? And what is the intersection between those things?
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that does kind of boil down to the epitome of what we're kind of looking at here, right? Like, how do all these things interact and ultimately just make us better at, leadership life and running as well? So great question. Oh, that's perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully our listeners have learned something. I'm sure people will reach out if there are things that were really interesting. Are people able to kind of get in touch with you if they have any questions that have been sparked out of here? I know you're a pretty open guy. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so I'm super easy to find. Email ben@diversity.net.nz or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always super keen to chat to folks.
Awesome. Brilliant. Hey, well, thank you very much. We might have to bring you on again because I'm sure there's a lot more to unpick, and I've really enjoyed today. But yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That is the first episode done and dusted. Thank you very much for listening and hopefully still being here to hear this. Given it's the first episode, I would love to have your feedback. What did you like? What did you not like? What can we do differently next time? If you have questions you want to have for guests in the future, let me know. Whatever it is, I'd love to hear it. But if you did enjoy it, please make sure that you're following on your preferred podcast player. Follow us on LinkedIn, that's going to be the main channel that I put this out as well. And we will have you here again next time. So until then, please enjoy and maybe even get out for a run yourself. Talk soon.